All right. It's great to be back on this stage. Kind of a lot going on in the past year, right? It's been an insane time, a pandemic that has been tragic beyond words, that paradoxically has been so great for South Florida real estate. And today's first panel, as Amir mentioned, how can the government best position South Florida for more growth? And I want to thank the sponsor for this panel, Lev Capital. But we have the most powerful mayors in South Florida assembled here today, who I'll introduce in a minute. But in many ways, politicians are the ultimate decision makers in real estate. They decide what projects can be built, how land is used, what's built where. If you really think about it, there's no other industry where government is so enmeshed in what happens at such a detailed level. On the flip side, who funds politicians more as a group than the real estate industry? Around half the direct donations for one of these mayors on the stage, to take an example, came only from real estate. And I won't mention who, but he loves tech. He loves tech. So we want to find out more how these mayors are working to get things built, get deals done. How do we keep the strong market going strong? So I want to introduce who we have on stage today. And also, Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber apologized. He can't be here today. He prefers to do Zoom calls with developers. So he wasn't available. So first, we have Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who was just reelected the other day. He's getting sworn in today as well. And he came on this stage back in 2017 as a commissioner, now Miami Mayor. Who knows what's next? VP on a Nikki Haley presidential ticket, maybe? We'll see. And he's made his name for himself as the tech whisperer, luring Silicon Valley to Miami, and is probably single-handedly raising property values in the city. So thanks for joining us, Mayor. All right. Next is Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, who holds the extremely powerful political position overseeing the county. She also cut a national footprint too recently in the face of tragedy as a public face of the response to the Surfside collapse. And it's her job to be the adult in the room, worrying about residents getting priced out, building safety, and a host of other pressing issues. So we'll hear more from her. We also have with us today West Palm Beach Mayor Keith James, who's now presiding over an extreme amount of development in the city. Just a big deal yesterday for $500 million. You've got the battle of the billionaires in West Palm. You have to be a billionaire to develop there, apparently. Jeff Green, Steve Ross, Charles Cohn, George Perez as of yesterday. So we'll hear more about that today. Next, Dean Trentalis, Mayor of Fort Lauderdale. He came out of a career practicing real estate law, served as a city commissioner, making big decisions. I think one overriding aspect of Fort Lauderdale is it doesn't want to become another Miami Beach. And how do you get that balance between development and overdevelopment? So we'll hear more about that. And finally, we have Mayor Scott Singer of Boca. Now, I think if Boca ever had the connotation of being a little sleepy, I think that's changed. The Bright Line is coming in. We'll talk more about that today. We've got companies moving in. We've got just overall affluence. We've got families moving in, I think, more so than in the past in Boca, and just a lot going on there. So thank you, Mayor. All right. So my first question is for Mayor Suarez, but all of you. There's really been talk of a tech boom. And how many companies are you actually seeing come into your cities? And how much of a boon is this for real estate? What's the real and what's the hype here?
So first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's nice to be with the dream team, the Fab Five. I don't know how we would do in an NBA basketball game, but it's fun to be here with my colleagues and friends. Just to give you some KPI metrics that I think are important to think about. In the last 16 months, we have moved $1.2 trillion worth of assets under management companies to the Miami area. We've created over 2,000 jobs permanent. with a promise based on our incentive programs to bring in about 8,000 jobs, which is slightly under $1 billion of recurring economic impact. We've done in the last 8 weeks alone about $1 billion in venture capital deals, which if annualized would be about $6 billion. That'd be about a 200% increase from the pre-pandemic year. So I think Miami, it's fair to say right now, is building on its reputation, or on the reputation that we're trying to create as the center of the universe and the capital of capital.
Right.
And it's really exciting for me as the father of two, a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, to know that we're building the kind of city that is ahead of the disruptive forces that we see, which are becoming exponentially more disruptive, and that we're going to create the kind of economy that can weather any storm, no pun intended, and that will be here for my children's grandchildren. That's the kind of city that we want to make. We want to make the city of the future, and we're putting in the building blocks right now.
And Mayor Suarez, I want to ask you about this too. How many of these are new jobs being created here, and how many are jobs that are, moving down? Do you make that distinction? Because I think it's an important one for the people of South Florida.
It's hard to tell. They're all new jobs. They're all high-paying jobs, $120,000 average. And that's, by the way, not to get into, obviously, one of the big things that we're here to talk about, which is the real estate market. I mean, we were growing at an 8.5% clip my first year's mayor, 10.5% clip my second year's mayor, and now, I mean, you guys see it in terms of the transactions that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. I don't have to sell you on that. The market is incredibly hot, and Miami is the place to be.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask Mayor James a question too, because part of the premise on all the development in West Palm, and there's a ton of development happening now. First, it was just Jeff Green. Then it seemed like Related came in, and now we have a mix of developers. It's kind of premised based on the fact of companies moving down south. Do you think after COVID wanes, is that a concern that a lot of it's premised on companies moving down? And do you think that'll continue after, COVID kind of is less of a factor?
Absolutely. I was just in New York last week talking to a number of companies that either have a footprint in West Palm Beach that they're looking to expand or looking to come to South Florida, West Palm Beach in particular, and there was no hesitation. It didn't look like there's any, the pipeline is not closing. And so we have to take advantage of this opportunity while we're there and anticipate the needs of these companies, whether it's in education, whether it's in affordability of housing. But I have every expectation that this is going to continue for a while, and there are developers who are putting up Class A office buildings who are basically making the same bet.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to ask you about Jeff Green and his plans there. You've seen a lot of flip-flopping from some of the developers there. How do you deal with that as a mayor?
I won't say you see a lot of flip-flopping from some of the developers. You've seen a lot of flip-flopping from a particular developer. And it's interesting because, and Jeff was a supporter of mine when I ran, and he came at the beginning of COVID and basically said there's no more market for Class A office space. No one is traveling, so I don't need to put up a hotel. Let me just put all residences up. And he had gotten a number of incentives to go up extra height because he was going to give the city a 200-room flagship hotel as well as 200,000 square feet of Class A. And I basically said, no, a deal's a deal. You got your 30 stories. And so we went back and forth. You probably covered some of that in the press. I've since said that probably about 3 months ago, I got a call from Jeff, and in his own way, he basically apologized and said I was right, in his own way. Those words didn't come out of his mouth, but if you read between the lines.
So I think you're happy now. It's a bigger diversity of developers in West Palm.
Well, yeah. I mean, you hear the names, you hear the Related, you hear about Jeff Green and others, but there are a number of other developers who are putting up buildings, Class A office buildings, who are kind of flying below the radar. We've got another part of our city that's about to explode, which we're calling Nora, which is going to be similar to what's going on here in Wynwood. There are a number of things going on that don't maybe get the headlines, but that's what gives me optimism as the mayor, is the diversity of projects that are coming out of the ground.
Yeah, which seems great. Mayor Trontalis, I wanted to ask you a question about Fort Lauderdale. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, you're trying to strike a line between overdevelopment and, you know, Fort Lauderdale has its share of infrastructure issues historically. You know, there were flooding, things like that. I know.
Really? I didn't hear that.
You should read the news.
Yeah.
But what's kind of your stance on development these days? And I know earlier in the year it was the Baja Mar development that was kind of kicked down the road. It was $1 billion development. What are kind of the biggest challenges you're navigating these days?
All right, so you asked a lot of questions. So let me answer.
That was 3 or 4 questions right there.
So let me first say that all the mayors here share a wonderful opportunity right now to embrace the growth, embrace the popularity of our communities, and to try to do it in the right way. So what is government's role in all of that? Government's role is to make sure that if we do have growth and we do have investment, that the basic infrastructure is there to accommodate the investment. So water, sewer, making sure transportation networks connect and are fluid. Right now, as you probably know, Fort Lauderdale is engaged in building tunnels through the middle of its city to get people from one point to another. We're also talking about putting Brightline underground as it comes through the city of Fort Lauderdale to accommodate that coastal link between Miami and West Palm Beach. So these are the kinds of forward-thinking opportunities that we need to embrace in order to make sure that, as Mayor Suarez said, that we're talking about planning for the grandchildren of the children today. Because if we don't make those decisions today and we don't make right decisions, then we are not going to be sustainable cities. People will move to other locations and they'll say, this place is too difficult to live in. So government's role is partnering with private development. Government's role is to ensure that the infrastructure is in place, and furthermore, places like Fort Lauderdale and all the other cities are aggressively trying to find opportunities for affordable housing. I know Fort Lauderdale just this past month did ribbon cuttings on 500 affordable housing apartments, both for families as well as seniors. If we do not allow our inner city areas to have a mixed demographic, we're going to have an unsustainable downtown. And I know all the mayors here are focused on that, and how important that is.
Thanks, Mayor Trontalis. Mayor Suarez said he has to get sworn in at noon, or else we don't have a new Miami mayor, which could be a problem.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. I want to thank particularly The Real Deal. I want to thank particularly all of you who are in this room. You all are the ones that have invested your confidence in me, and I work hard every single day to be able to give you back what you deserve, and you are the best marketers of our city. And you are all a portal of positivity, and I can't tell you how much strength I draw from you, and I just want to say thank you, and now I have to go, otherwise I'm not going to be your mayor, so I got to get going. Okay. Thank you, guys. God bless you. Thank you for doing this here. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
My follow-up question for the mayor is cryptocurrency going to replace the U.S. dollar in Miami anytime soon? Yes. That's a yes. Okay, I want to ask Mayor Levine Cava a question about infrastructure, and it's, you know, we're seeing such a booming real estate market. We're seeing such crazy building. There's a safety issue, but there's also just the infrastructure issue of how do we handle this many people down here? What kind of planning are we doing?
Yeah, thanks. I really am thrilled to be here. Thank you. And Miami-Dade County, 34 cities, trying to corral them all. What is it, like herding cats sometimes? So, you know, we have to work together, and tragedy like Surfside does bring us together, sadly, and COVID and so on. But I really agree with what was just said, that it's our job to make sure that the infrastructure exists, and similarly, that you build where there is infrastructure. So, you know, that's where we really have to work together to make sure that we don't overload our roadways, our water system. I know we're often keeping people waiting because they can't get in to the water and sewer system. So we take a very, very serious look at what is needed for growth, because we are continuing to grow. And of course, this infrastructure bill that just passed is going to be a real boon for us. and we're looking forward to competing and getting a lot of dollars. There's also money at the state, which we're going to fight for, because yesterday we were informed that we're not getting any of the water and sewer money that we believe we're entitled to. So if you want to know more about that, stay tuned, because we have to convert septic to sewer so we don't pollute our bay with the rising sea level, overfilling the septic systems and putting that into our bay. Our economy is our environment, so we're working really, really hard on transit solutions, our SMART plan, the water system, the transit, and making sure that we have the infrastructure needed to grow.
And on that point, I wanted to switch back over to Mayor Trontalis, and I want to get to you in a second, Mayor Singer. But Mayor Trontalis, you had a meeting with Elon Musk's people about building a tunnel under Fort Lauderdale. What's the status on that?
So, as I was alluding to earlier, all of that is part of trying to build infrastructure for the future. So we flew out to Las Vegas, where they're now building a 28-mile underground tunnel system throughout Las Vegas, through their downtown, through their casino section, into the suburbs. Why? Because the roads built 60, 70 years ago were not intended to accommodate the amount of traffic that we now see. So we've come up with some innovative approaches to try to avoid traffic and burrow through our cities through an amazing, unbelievable concept where you're driven through a tunnel by a Tesla driver, and you're taken from one point to another in, perhaps 5 minutes would otherwise take you a half hour, 45 minutes. So it's not just a dark tunnel, it's a sound and light show. I think it'll be an attraction just in and of itself. But the reason why we're doing that is because you realize we're tapped out. Our roads can no longer accommodate the amount of popularity that our cities are now enjoying. So let's think ahead, and that's why we're also doing a tunnel for the trains. You heard about the Coastal Link, right?
Right, and so these tunnels have actually been built out west, right? There's actual proven.
Well, in the test tunnel that they originally built was in Hawthorne, California, which is a suburb of LA, and that's a 1-mile tunnel. They also built a test tunnel in Las Vegas, which is just under a mile, which I drove through. I actually drove through both tunnels. And now they're going to expand that to a 28-mile system underground. So yes, it's in place. They have been done, and they can do it for a fraction of what other contractors have always said that it would cost. Even FDOT now realizes that these tunnels can be built for a lot less money than they originally projected.
Scott, tell me about some of the things that are going on in Boca that are going to help. I know you have the Brightline station coming up. What effect do you think that's going to have?
Well, starting with Brightline, I think it's going to have a huge impact. My fellow mayors have had the benefit of that station in our town, and I went to Brightline 2 years ago and said, you need a station in Boca. We are our own separate market. We have more than half the corporate headquarters of our own county. We've got 13,000 businesses of a city of 100,000 people, and tremendous wealth, as we're seeing, and affluence, and record sales and home prices and business strength. So they recognize that. Brightline should be due in 2022 in the second half. I think it's going to be a game changer to be able to connect to these other cities for both employment. Mayor James described, and I used his examples often in getting support for this, of how transformative it has been to West Palm Beach and the area around it. It's going to have the same impact on our downtown. To get back to the general question, though, about how government can best position South Florida for growth, I think we have a lot of things in Boca Raton and all of our cities. This is one region. It's not just Miami, it's South Florida. And I'm happy when I see, and I'm sorry Francis left to get sworn in for a good reason, because all that he's doing is rising the tide of everyone. We're collaborating on so many efforts. But government does well by making sure we have the infrastructure there. We've got the right business climate, and we have all the amenities that attract people there. Well, we have that in Boca Raton. We have some of the lowest tax rates of any full service, not only in Palm Beach County, but in all of South Florida. We have continued investment in our infrastructure. We're in the middle of a 5-year, $500 million infrastructure campaign for our roads and underground utilities, all without a tax increase. That's just part of our ongoing budget. We've consistently invested in that. We make sure that we have safety. Our crime rate is down 9%, even as crime rates are increasing elsewhere. And crimes are down 30% over the last 4 years, which is tremendous because they were low to begin with, near 40-year lows. And we're seeing the results. We're seeing people flocking here in no way. Our schools are reaching capacity, so much so that we had to partner with the school district to give land to build a new school. But all of this bodes well for Boca and for all of South Florida.
And then that kind of raises the other question about opportunities for development beyond what exists now. So, I mean, I think one issue is, there's only a finite amount of land to build on in South Florida. And this is a question for you, Mayor Levine Cava, but there's pressure from the real estate industry to move the urban development boundary, farther west into the Everglades. Is that something you would consider, or what would make you consider that at any point?
So at the current time, people are clamoring for housing and housing that they can afford. Of course, the further away you are, the more affordable it is, and then that just compounds traffic. So it's kind of a circular problem. Our environment is our economy. Our drinking water is the Everglades. We have a third of the entire state of Florida depending on the Everglades for its fresh water supply. So we can't take that lightly. Also, development on the east, which also always under review in the East Everglades, has the risk of polluting the bay further. And again, we have to clean up that bay. That bay is facing enormous challenges, fish die-off, seagrass die-off. Without a healthy bay, we will not have a healthy economy. Mm-hmm. So all of these things have to be balanced. And unfortunately, we do have finite space. Mm-hmm. I want to mention about infrastructure. Infrastructure is also housing that people can afford, the workforce. So we definitely need to double down on all the different ways that we can have mixed income housing, ways that we can incentivize housing along transit corridors, differently things that bring housing within reach for more of our workforce.
Mm-hmm. And was there anything in the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that really helped South Florida?
Oh, there's a lot there. We're gearing up. We're getting ready.
Nice.
Very good.
I want to touch, too, on, with all the transplants coming down here, all the luxury housing, obviously it makes life harder for people already in South Florida, and getting priced out. You're hearing people from Florida move up farther in the state or move to Georgia, that's happening. But I don't think there's going to be rent control in South Florida anytime soon. This is not a red tape kind of place. So what do you do to create the opportunities for development? Can you incentivize developers where they're getting a lot of breaks to do the affordable housing? What's kind of the thing on your mind there? Yeah,
well, we definitely already accelerate permitting processes. We're looking at ways to cut red tape further. There's other public lands. The school board has lands. Other cities have lands. We're looking at building infill in existing lots, allowing greater densification in individual homes, reducing the price of the building materials. And this is already being done by some developers without subsidy, which is great. Mm-hmm. So everything possible.
And can you reduce that, give incentives on the price of building materials? Is that what you mean by that?
Basically, they're building smaller, those sorts of things. But definitely open to incentives that will move housing in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about international activity. I mean, so much of what happened during COVID was based on, other parts of the U.S. The international travel ban ended last week. Miami just started nonstop flights to Dubai and back. What can you guys do as politicians to help the flow of international money coming here? I remember, several years ago there was talk of having a nonstop flight from China, which seems like that could tie into, some pull that you guys could have. What other things are you kind of thinking about?
Well, let me mention that our Miami International Airport was #1 for global travel in the United States during the pandemic. Yeah. And of course, we were open for business and people knew it. And now we're even more open for business with the return from many countries. So I think we just continue doing what we're doing, being the best, the epicenter of the planet, paradise. People want to be here. And I like to say there's two kinds of people, the people that already live here and the people who want to live here.
Mayor Singer, are there things you think you can do to help?
I think we're doing them. I think we're all doing them. People recognize the value of South Florida. We recognize the brand. In fact, when you introduced me, you said Boca. You didn't say Boca Raton. And one of the things I love about our city is that you can go anywhere in the world and just say the one name, Boca, and people know where you are. But beyond that, we're in the center of a 3 international airports. We have our own Boca Raton private airport, which we opened a customs facility several years ago. We recognize the value proposition of people being able to clear customs, and it's yielded results. We've had companies, international companies, move headquarters or set up offices here in Boca Raton. We have a strong presence from South America, from Israel, and other places as well. We work with the consulates in Brazil and Argentina to bring investors to Boca Raton, and it's working. And I think just our presence in South Florida and the the business climate, all the other attractive things about our climate, will continue to see capital fly here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that in Miami-Dade County alone, we have 1,400 multinationals headquartered.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
And some of the Latin American money that's coming in from residential has really waned in recent years, but if that comes back, that's a whole nother source of, potential growth, which would be exciting. I want to talk about safety for a second and Surfside. Mayor Singer, you kind of went out of the box and did some pretty stringent safety measures in Boca, which outside, Miami-Dade County and Broward, there really wasn't anything going on. What led you to do that, and what does it encompass?
Well, sure. The first thought after the Surfside tragedy was, what could we do to help? And then our second thought was, what could we do to prevent a similar tragedy? And we don't have all the facts, but I thought it was important, and so do my city council colleagues, that we move swiftly to try to put in what we thought were better practices than what had been in place. So we took the model of what Miami-Dade and Broward had been doing for decades and tweaked and made more stringent that set of certification standards. So instead, buildings will be recertified after 30 years with follow-up inspections. One critical change is that we made all reports, including draft reports, will be publicly filed, because we got feedback from some in the building inspection community and the inspectors, the engineers, saying, well, we didn't want pressure from our clients not to make public draft reports. It's all going to be out there. And we thought it was important to get ahead of this to bring confidence back to the market. I've had a number of people say that, wow, this is really good. I feel comfortable about investing in Boca Raton because we know your buildings at least are going to have more stringent certification standards. The condo association owners there were on board, and I think, frankly, all of us are going to have to look at it. Even if the legislature doesn't, I think the insurance community is going to expect more of our buildings.
Mm-hmm. Mayor James, there's not currently guidelines in West Palm for safety in the same way that there are in Miami-Dade and Broward. Is that something you're looking at?
Yes, absolutely. We are working in conjunction with the county. The Palm Beach County League of Cities has put together a task force. We're also waiting to see what the results are of the investigation as to why Surfside happened, so that we can understand what those causes were and be more focused as we're developing solutions. We're waiting to see what comes out of the state in terms of legislation. But our approach is to work more collaboratively. It doesn't make sense for West Palm Beach to do something that is inconsistent with what's going on. So we're working with the county and the state, and also trying to understand what the true causes were so we could come up with a collaborative effort.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I was going to ask Mayor Suarez this. He has been a powerful cheerleader for the city. There's been some drama at City Hall. Mayor Singer, I know your predecessor, as the Boca mayor, ran into trouble. Is there any perception that, politics needs to be more closely monitored in South Florida, or, does what's happening in City Hall in Miami, does that cast a negative, perception of how government works in South Florida?
I don't think so. I think politics is pretty well monitored in South Florida. I mean, we're political people. People understand it. People follow it. I think what we need to focus more on is on the governance. It's easy for all of us to get caught up in the politics, but when you talk the story of my city, of everyone's city, of the county, of all of South Florida, we're crushing it, and we're going to continue to crush it. And I look at this audience, I see ambassadors for South Florida here. I'm grateful for what you're doing. I'm excited when I have my friends who are selling 8-figure homes in Boca Raton after another. Now, that's not every home in Boca, but there's enough of them that it keeps on my radar screen. All of us are seeing what the investment we can do collaboratively. So I think that partnership between business and government has to continue and accelerate. It's not a problem. More scrutiny is good. We're getting plenty of it. Let's focus on the end result, which is make South Florida the pinnacle of the world.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask, too, about, I mentioned this Miami Beach Mayor, Dan Gelber, who had a call with developers. And, you see how, as politicians, you really have to balance the private business community and your constituents. is that a balancing act that's hard to do? What's kind of your, modus operandus or your general kind of guidelines for how you navigate dealing with these, twin entities that you're constantly dealing with? Is that something, how do you approach that, Mayor Levine Cava?
So it's got to be good for business for it to succeed. Business community has to embrace whatever we're trying to do to improve our community well-being, quality of life. We're all in it for the same purpose, improved quality of life. That benefits all of us. So I like to hear from everybody, and I believe in the three legs of the stool for good government, business, and civil society. We just had the largest ever civic engagement initiative in Miami-Dade County. 1.1 million data points, 27,000 filled out a survey, hundreds more came out in person, and it shaped our budget this year and my work plan for the next 3 years of this term. So, and it was business, it was faith, it was nonprofits, it was neighborhoods, people from all different stripes, and that led to a shared vision how we can have a better society, a better community. And how do we make sure that our government is functioning effectively is if we have all of those active and at the table. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires activism. You're all active on the issues of real estate. Hopefully you're active on quality of life issues more broadly too, because that's what keeps it real. That's the real deal.
Mayor Singer, Mayor Trentalis, how do you balance these competing interests? I mean, that seems like it's one of the main hardest parts of the job, probably.
I'm fortunate in Boca Raton because I think people recognize that our quality of life and public safety are tied to our strong economy. There's not that traditional, in some other places you have a battle, a pushback. We don't have that. I think a lot of people, because we have 13,000 businesses for 100,000 residents, they're involved in businesses. They want to see businesses thrive. And the type of businesses we have are ones that stimulate the economy, a heavy tech base, financial services. We don't have heavy industry that creates problems where some other places might be in the Rust Belt, for example. So it's listening to everyone, as Mayor Levine Cava said, but it's also recognizing that they're not an either or. It's all in the same boat, and that collaboration makes our city greater.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a tough question, but do donors get heard more?
Not with me. I listen to everyone. In fact, I embarked on the first series of town halls by a sitting council member my first year in office. I've continued that in 7 years. I send out my own newsletter, as all of us do. We've been incredibly accessible, and I think we're trying to raise that level of accessibility. So no, I listen to everyone. Now, if donors think that they get more access from that, well, that's on them. But I'd like to think that they're supporting candidates because they have a vision, not because they get special access. They don't with me.
Mm-hmm. Mayor James?
Can I interject a thought here? Because we've been talking about growth, and growth is fantastic. And I think where we sit as mayors, we have to, at least my commitment, is to be very intentional about ensuring that the benefits of the growth to my city are inclusive. All right? We've had economic booms in the past before. There are certain communities and certain neighborhoods in all of our cities that have been left out. And so what I do not want to do, in fact, I would consider myself an abject failure as a mayor if at the other end of this cycle, those same communities, those same neighborhoods were once again left out. So I think what we have to work for, what I work hard each and every day, is certainly creating an infrastructure in my city that encourages this growth. But I'm also looking for the private sector to work with me to ensure that those neighborhoods that have been left behind, whether it's because of lack of educational opportunities, whether it's because of lack of housing opportunities, whether it's because of lack of workforce development opportunities, to working hand in hand with the private sector to ensure that we are also lifting up those particular neighborhoods and communities. Because if we do not, this growth is not going to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see that working? Oh, go ahead, Mayor Trentalis.
So let me comment on that, because many of these communities that have been left out, as you say, in the past, they're often very conflicted, because many of these communities will start to see redevelopment happen in their neighborhoods, and all of a sudden they're saying, no gentrification. We don't want that in our neighborhood. But But gentrification means development. Gentrification means jobs and job opportunities. Gentrification means repurposing areas that have long since remained neglected and dormant. And so we have a political as well as a cultural conflict here to try to work with our neighbors in making sure that everyone is part of the change and part of the growth. But again, that's a big challenge in my community. And it often has racial overtones, and it often has its way of often blocking progress, which I feel will ultimately, as they say, a rising tide floats all boats. So in this case, we feel that everyone can benefit from it, but everyone has got to understand that change is for everybody. It's not just it doesn't just focus on one particular area.
But that's why the growth has to be combined with investment in programs and policies in those neighborhoods that will lift those people as well. It's more than just putting a Starbucks on the corner and calling that progress. That's not enough. We have to ensure that we're investing in programs in these neighborhoods, whether it's workforce development, whether it's educational opportunities, so that, as Mayor Suarez said, that my children's grandchildren will be will know that they are living in a city that is welcoming to diversity and inclusivity. And that's something we have to be very creative and very intentional about. Listen, it would be great to continue to have these battle of the billionaires fighting for more Class A office space in my city, but I have to hold them accountable to help me to ensure that no one is indeed left behind as we grow my city.
I want to say that in real estate, we want the high rollers, and we want them to help us do what's just been said here. We want to create communities where we can invest so that the workforce can benefit, so that people don't have to live in ghettos, that we can have thriving communities throughout, and it's what we pay attention to. So I've created an Office of Equity, I've created an Office of Engagement, and we have a big focus on neighborhood revitalization because it's good for all of us. Mm-hmm. So we want it all. Yeah,
that's great. And Mayor James, we're talking about billionaire developers in West Palm again. Charles Cohn is building there, and just last week, he seems like a guy who can get his feathers ruffled sometimes. His attorney threatened or alluded to suing the city over, a garage design that, that the city commissioners didn't like. How much, is that, when these lawsuits happen, how serious are they, or how do you kind of approach that?
It's the rough and tumble of politics, right? I mean, no one really wants to see the sausage be made, and that comes with the territory. His lawyer knows, as well as his client, that his job is to get 3 votes of the commissioners. I don't know how they should do that, but you can't blame the decision makers for making the decision. What you need to do is to present a business case that will get you 3 votes of the 5. So that's the rough and tumble of politics, and it happens. Will that project get done? It probably will, but it's going to take some tweaking, and I can understand the frustration, and I can understand the fact that it's not happening as quickly as Mr. Cohen and his attorneys would. But, it doesn't help your cause to simply throw out threats that you're going to sue the city. Mm-hmm. We get sued all the time. Your job is to get the 3 votes.
Right. And Mayor Singer, how do you kind of approach that? You've dealt with some of that stuff with Midtown in Boca in the past and some other projects.
Well, yeah, so one of the largest property owners in Boca Raton of commercial space sued the city when the council did not do a zoning overlay that they desired. Instead of collaborating with us, they sued. They sued in 3 different suits, went to appeal, they lost them all. So what do? We went on as business as normal. And what happened this past Monday? They came back on a proposal because they own the old IBM complex, the birthplace of the IBM computer. The building literally where it was built and invented was in Boca Raton. It's one of the largest office buildings in all of Florida, and I believe in square footage, it is the single largest office complex. They're looking at turning this into an innovation campus, which it already is, but expanding it, taking out some lower-paying jobs and trying to attract more high tech. So they came in with a proposal about adding maybe 1,000 units of residential nearby, retail, restaurant space, shared civic space, And what did we do? We talked out with them. We gave them some guidelines to go forward. We're not holding a grudge about litigation. We just move forward. As Mayor James said, it is rough and tumble, but we're all sophisticated business people, and at least we're trying to run our city as a sophisticated business. So we welcome good ideas from everyone, and we want to see what benefits our residents and our businesses.
And I'm sure it's a learning curve for some of these guys to deal with the civic process rather than their own private companies and doing things the way they'd like to do without any interference or public input. I want to bring it closer to home for a second. We're in Mashi Mana's building today. Obviously, he's purchased a lot in Wynwood, a lot in downtown Miami. He's got a lot of big projects, even if they're all not brought to fruition yet. I'm curious, Mayor Levine Cava, what would you like to see with these neighborhoods we're talking about, Wynwood and downtown?
Well, this is an example of a neighborhood that has truly come to life in a way that makes it a world destination through the artistry, through the creativity, and hopefully is one that will allow for those who lived here before to be part of it. So I think it's really, people like neighborhoods. This is a great neighborhood. Just happens to be one that is world class. But I think Mashi Mana is one of the real creative forces in our community today. He's full of big ideas, this being just one of them. And he also is about equity. He wants to be sure that the development supports the local workforce, that it lifts, the rising tide will lift all boats. That's part of his message, part of his purpose. So we like developers like that.
Great. And 2 more questions, and then we'll have to wrap up at time. But I'm curious how much you guys all talk to one another on a regular basis. Somebody was telling me that with the Amazon HQ2, there was kind of more regional cooperation and talking, but do you hop on the phone with one another regularly, or how does it work?
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I enjoyed most during the height or the depth of COVID was there was a regular Zoom conference of mayors that was convened by the Bloomberg organization. Mayor Singer was on that as well. It was just nice to talk to other mayors from around the country, around the world, literally, who are going through something as unique as a global pandemic. It kind of lets you know that you're not alone. And so I have continued conversations with Mayor Singer on other issues. He is the president of the Florida Conference of Mayors. And I think it's very important for mayors to continue to have those conversations on different issues.
Yes, the answer is, and maybe just because you're a county mayor, maybe I talk to you a little less often, but with my fellow city mayors all the time. During the pandemic, it was a year ago, I think, Mayor Trentalis, Mayor Suarez, and I had lunch here in Wynwood just talking about collaboration and what that year has been. As Mayor James, we were on calls weekly or every other week during the pandemic. I am the president of the Florida League of Mayors, so I talk with mayors statewide. But some of the best ideas I've gotten from Dean, from Keith, and trying to bring them to the city. It's all about best practices.
All right, and my last question today, we mentioned donating, right? Donors don't get special attention, but say you're a broker out there and you want to make yourself heard. What should you do? Like, what groups should you get involved in? How do you get started? How do you involve yourself in the political process?
Well, I, for one, love to talk to all the different associations. So whether it's CREW or the Miami Board of Realtors, I'm there. Ask me, I'm there. I've spoken at a number of the conferences because we need to hear from you. You've got the intelligence on the street. And I'll use as one example, I was in Glasgow for COP26 on UN Climate Change Summit, and I met with a real estate economist who told me that there are a lot of questions about viability, long-term investment strategies here in South Florida with our climate change challenges. But the fact that we're active and that we're doing things to mitigate and adapt puts us in the more favorable category. So these are things that we should be talking about as fellow mayors. How do we continue to make ourselves viable and sustainable on the world stage?
So if I may chime in here, you know, before COVID, it was regular practice with me, and I'm sure with my fellow mayors, to go out into the realtor groups, having been invited multiple times by realtor groups, different offices, Sotheby's, Douglas Elliman, always being invited to breakfast, lunches, and things like that, to talk to their members, to talk to their associates. So that practice should return. Now that most of us have been vaccinated, right? And it's a lot more, these opportunities are a lot more available to each and every one of us. Let's take advantage of that. Invite your mayors, invite your community leaders to your offices so that we can resume that dialogue. So you want to hear what's going on in your cities, what plans do we have? You know, we want to hear feedback. What do you want to see? Because as it was said, I believe by Scott, that you are the ambassadors out there. You are the people that are the eyes and ears of what's going on in our cities. You know who's coming here. Is it foreign investment? Is it domestic investment? Young, old. Who finds South Florida to be so attractive that they're coming here? We need to hear that. And so I always take advantage of every invitation that I ever get, and I think that's really the way we'll continue doing it forward.
And I think even in my case, if you just reach out to me, I've got an economic development director. I'm happy to take a meeting and understand not only what you're interested in doing, but what you see as challenges in my particular city, so that I can help you to invest in the city. It's not always rainbows and ice cream. I get that. So let me know, let us know what some of the concerns that you have, what they may be, so that we can begin addressing those. But I'm happy to take one-on-one meetings, email me, and we can set those up.
May I?
Yeah.
I think 3 things. First, I continually reach out for ideas, but I love when people bring ideas to me. I've actually talked with people I know about a mayor's task force on streamlining and a mayor's task force on business development. You have ideas, reach out to me, please. My cell, 561-479-9910. 561-479-9910. You can find me on social media, too, and everywhere else. Yeah. They say good mayors borrow ideas and great mayors steal them outright. I don't mind, but it's not about stealing the idea. It's about making sure the idea comes in. And yes, as everyone else said, you know, we're back in events. We go to a lot of events, and I love talking to real estate groups. I come from a real estate background because you see what's going on and you know what we need. We've improved our streamlining of permits, signage, other issues that were bottlenecks. We've gotten rid of a lot of them through active discussion and intervention. So I welcome your thoughts. You don't have to wait.
All right. I hope everybody wrote down Mayor Singer's phone number. I'm sure your phone's going to blow up in about 2 minutes. I want everybody to give a big round of applause. You know, it's amazing what's happening in South Florida, and these guys are at the center of it. So thank you so much. Thank you, mayors. And everybody, there's going to be a quick video, and then we're going to go into another panel on some of the flashy, sexy hospitality, hotels, restaurants that are happening right now in South Florida. Thank you, everybody.